So let me ask you something uncomfortable. How bad could it really be? Retiring at 65. That's the plan for most of us, right? Work hard, save up, hit 65, then finally live your life. But there's a hidden danger inside that plan, a quiet gotcha that is already destroying the retirement dreams of millions of Americans, and most people won't even see it coming until it's too late. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what that danger is, and more importantly, what to do about it right now.
Here's the thing nobody tells you at the retirement planning seminar. Nobody puts this on the brochure. Nobody mentions it when they're selling you the dream of 65. There is a number, a very specific, very uncomfortable number, that should completely reshape how every American thinks about retirement timing. It's called your healthy life expectancy. Not how long you'll live, but how long you'll live well. The World Health Organization tracks this data across every major country on the planet, and when you line them all up, the picture is not pretty for Americans. Let's walk through it. Japan sits at the top of the list. The average Japanese person maintains their health until about 74 years old. Singapore is right behind. It's 73.6 years. Korea, 73.1 years. Switzerland, 72.5. Cyprus, Israel, Spain, France, country after country after country, all clustered somewhere between 71 and 74 years of healthy life. And then you get to the United States, the wealthiest nation on Earth, the country that spends more on healthcare than any other country in human history. And our number? 66.1 years. Let that sink in for a moment. The average American loses their health at 66.1 years old. The average American retires at 65. That means the average American gets roughly 13 months of truly healthy, active, free retirement. 13 months to do everything you spent 40 years working toward. That beach vacation you kept postponing, that road trip you always said someday to, that time with your grandchildren you were saving for retirement. 13 months. And that's the average, which means for a very large portion of Americans, it's even less than that. Now, before you shut this down and say, that won't happen to me, think about this carefully. These are not random numbers pulled from thin air. This is World Health Organization data, collected across entire populations, averaged across millions of real lives. Real people who also thought they had more time. This is not about scaring you. This is about making sure you are planning for reality, not the retirement fantasy that gets sold to you on every financial commercial you've ever seen. Because the math doesn't care about your optimism, and 65 is not the safe finish line you were told it was. So now let's look at the other side of this equation, because it's not just about when you lose your health, it's about when Americans are actually retiring, and the data here is just as uncomfortable. Gallup has been tracking American retirement patterns for years, and what they found should genuinely concern every working adult in this country. Only 1% of Americans retire between 40 and 44 years old. 1%. Between 45 and 49, another 2%. 50 to 54. Only 6% of Americans are retired by that age. And here's the part that stings. A significant portion of those people didn't choose to retire early. They were pushed out. Health issues, layoffs, corporate restructuring. They didn't retire on their terms. Retirement happened to them. 55 to 59, only 11%. And that number used to be nearly 20% back in 2007. It has been cut almost in half since then. Think about what that means. Americans are working longer and losing their health sooner. Those two lines are moving in the wrong direction simultaneously. 60 to 64, only 32% of Americans are retired, and that number used to be 41% not that long ago. So even at 64, 2 out of every 3 Americans are still working, still grinding, still waiting for the finish line. And then 65 to 69 arrives, and almost a third of Americans are still not retired, still at the desk, still on the clock. 70 to 74, 17% still working. 75 and older, 12% of Americans are still working past 75 years old. Let that image sit with you for a moment. 75 years old, still working, not because they love it, not because it gives them purpose, but because the math never worked out. Because nobody sat them down at 45 and showed them these numbers. Because the system is perfectly designed to keep you working right up until the window closes. And here is the brutal, honest truth that most financial content will never say out loud. Retiring at 65 is not a plan. It's a default. It's what happens when you don't have a plan. And the difference between those two things could literally be the difference between a full life and 13 months of freedom.
So what do you actually do with this information? Because data without direction is just anxiety, and that's not what we're here for. Let's start with the most important shift you can make, right now, today. Before we even talk about portfolios, tax strategies, or asset allocation, we need to talk about the one investment that no financial spreadsheet ever properly accounts for: your health. Because here's the cold truth: your wealth means absolutely nothing if your body can't cash the check. What good is a $2 million retirement account if you're spending it on medical bills instead of experiences? What good is finally having the time if you don't have the physical capacity to use it? Investing in your health is not a lifestyle suggestion. It is a financial strategy. Avoid the cheap, fast, processed food that is practically engineered into every corner of American life. Cook real food or buy real food, even if it costs more. That is not an expense. That is capital allocation toward your most important asset. Move your body. Cardiovascular activity a few times a week. Maintain your muscle mass, not for vanity, but because physical resilience in your 60s and 70s is worth more than any stock pick you'll ever make. Now, let's talk about the financial side, and this is where most Americans completely stall out. Not because the math is complicated, but because they never actually ask the right question. The right question is not, how do I survive until 65? The right question is, what would it actually take for me to retire at 55? And when you sit down and run those numbers honestly, it is often far less impossible than your brain has been telling you. But it starts with one non-negotiable rule. Rule number 1. You must spend less than you earn. It sounds embarrassingly simple, but over half of all Americans earning more than $100,000 a year are saving absolutely nothing, not a single dollar. A $100,000 salary? Zero savings. That is not an income problem. That is a priority problem. Earning well means nothing if every dollar that comes in has already been spent before it arrives. Now let's talk about the decisions, the lifestyle decisions that are silently bleeding your retirement dry while you're busy focusing on your investment returns. Because here's what most financial content won't tell you. Your biggest wealth destroyers are not bad stock picks. They're not market crashes. They're not even inflation. They are the quiet, expensive, normalized decisions that American consumer culture has convinced you are completely reasonable. Let's start with real estate. In today's world, do you genuinely need a second property? A vacation home that sits empty for 46 weeks a year while you're back at your desk paying for it? Property taxes that go up whether you use it or not. Maintenance costs that always arrive at the worst possible moment. HOA fees that exist purely to charge you money for rules you didn't agree to. A second home is often just wealth destruction with a better view.
Now let's talk about something even more uncomfortable: the financial cost of a broken relationship. This is not a marriage lecture. This is math. Divorce is one of the single most effective ways to derail a retirement plan that exists in modern American financial life. Splitting assets, legal fees, duplicate living expenses, two households running simultaneously where one used to run efficiently. That is a wealth event in reverse. Now, if a relationship is genuinely broken beyond repair, that is a deeply personal decision and nobody can make it for you. But if there is friction, distance, tension that could be worked through, investing in professional help, investing real time and real money into repairing that relationship is one of the highest return investments you will ever make. Not emotionally, financially. One household, shared financial goals, aligned spending habits, compound over decades into a retirement that actually works. The pattern is clear when you zoom out. One income stream focused, one primary residence, one household moving in one direction builds wealth at a rate that split finances simply cannot match. These are not romantic ideas. They are capital efficiency principles applied to real American life. The math doesn't have feelings, but it does keep score. And every unnecessary split, every duplicate expense, every avoidable financial fracture shows up eventually in your retirement account balance.
Here's something that will genuinely surprise you. There have been multiple serious academic studies on this, and when you ask the average American what determines investment success, most people say stock picking, choosing the right company, getting in at the right time, riding the wave up. That's what feels like investing. That's what looks like investing on television. But here's the reality. Stock selection accounts for somewhere between 5 and 10% of your long-term investment outcome. 5 to 10%. You know what accounts for 90%? Asset allocation. Simply put, what percentage of your portfolio is in stocks and what percentage is in bonds? That single decision, that unglamorous, unsexy spreadsheet decision, drives 90% of your financial outcome over a lifetime. And most Americans spend zero time on it. They spend hours researching individual stocks, and minutes, if that, on the decision that actually matters. Now here's where it gets psychologically complicated. You can sit down today and decide your risk tolerance. You can tell yourself you'll stay calm when the market drops. You can genuinely believe you won't panic. But the S&P 500 fell 60%. 60% during the Great Financial Crisis, and almost nobody who said they'd stay the course actually stayed the course, because risk tolerance is not what you think you'll feel, it's what you actually feel at 2 in the morning when your entire nest egg is down 40% and the headlines are screaming collapse. That's when asset allocation either saves you or destroys you. This is why having a clear and honest plan matters so much. Not because the math is complicated, but because the emotions are. So here is where everything lands. When you turn 60, most Americans have fewer than 1,000 weeks of healthy, active life remaining. 1,000 weeks. That is not a lot of time. And every single week you delay building a real plan is a week you cannot get back. So be deliberate. Be honest about your health, your finances, your timeline, and start closing the gap between where you are and where you actually want to be. The window is open right now. Don't wait until 65 to find out it already closed. If this shifted how you think about retirement timing, the next video will show you exactly why retiring earlier is more achievable than you've been told.